In just 48 seconds, one of Britain's most beloved actresses went from smiling guest to furious force of nature, unleashing a verbal takedown so devastating that Lorraine Kelly's carefully crafted TV persona crumbled live on air. What started as light morning chat about acting achievements exploded into a firestorm of accusations, personal attacks, and a shocking exit that left the studio audience gasping and social media absolutely losing its mind. Before we dive into this absolute car crash of an interview, make sure you subscribe to this channel. We bring you daily videos exposing Britain's darkest scandals, the confrontations, the powers that be don't want you to see, and the moments that reveal what really happens when the cameras are rolling. Last night's episode of Lorraine was supposed to be a celebration. Helen Mirren, the dame of British cinema, Oscar winner, and national treasure, was booked to discuss her latest project and reflect on her incredible career spanning over 5 decades. The producers had prepared a cozy chat, some film clips, maybe a story or two about working with the greats. Nobody, and I mean nobody, expected what was about to unfold on that Glasgow studio floor. The interview began pleasantly enough. Lorraine greeted Helen with her trademark sunny smile, that Scottish warmth she's famous for radiating across the breakfast television landscape. Helen walked onto the set looking elegant as always, dressed in a sharp blazer, her silver hair perfectly styled. They exchanged pleasantries, talked about the weather, made small talk about Helen's journey to the studio. The audience clapped. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed safe. "So lovely to have you here, Helen," Lorraine gushed, leaning forward in that way she does, hands clasped together. "You look absolutely wonderful, as always. Now, we want to talk about your new film. But first, I have to ask, at your age, how do you keep that incredible energy? What's the secret?" There it was, the first crack in the facade. Helen's smile tightened ever so slightly, a micro-expression that most viewers probably missed, but that spoke volumes. She shifted in her seat, her posture becoming just a touch more rigid. "Well, Lorraine," Helen replied, her voice measured and calm, "I don't think age has much to do with energy levels. I've always been passionate about my work, and passion doesn't have an expiration date." Lorraine laughed, that high-pitched giggle she uses when she's not quite listening. "Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But seriously, you're what, 79 now? 80? It's just remarkable that you're still working at such a pace. Most people your age are, taking it easy, enjoying retirement." Helen's jaw tightened. "I'm 79, yes. And I don't consider my age to be the defining factor of my capabilities. I'm working because I choose to work, because I love what I do, not because I'm defying some arbitrary expectation of what a woman of my years should be doing." The temperature in the studio had started to shift. You could feel it, that subtle change in atmosphere that happens right before things go badly wrong. Lorraine, however, seemed completely oblivious. She pressed on, flipping through her notes with that relentless cheerfulness. Of course. Now, let's talk about your new film. It's quite a physical role, isn't it? Did you do your own stunts? I imagine, at this stage of your career, you'd have a stunt double for most things." Helen set her jaw. "I did many of my own stunts, actually. The director and I worked closely to ensure authenticity. My stunt coordinator was brilliant. But yes, I was very hands-on with the physical aspects of the role." "Brave!" Lorraine exclaimed, as if Helen had just announced she'd climbed Everest in her slippers. "Very brave at your age. I'm sure the insurance people were having kittens." She laughed at her own joke, looking to the audience for validation. This time, Helen didn't smile at all. "Lorraine, I'm starting to notice a pattern in your questions. Every single one has been about my age. Is there a particular reason you're so fixated on how old I am rather than discussing my actual work?" The audience went quiet. That collective intake of breath that happens when someone says what everyone's thinking but nobody dares to voice. Lorraine's smile flickered, but she recovered quickly, waving her hand dismissively. "Oh, Helen, don't be silly. I'm just amazed by you, that's all. It's inspiring to see someone of your generation still going strong. You're like the Energizer Bunny." Another forced laugh. "Now, moving on, let's talk about your iconic roles. Looking back on your career, do you ever wish you'd done things differently? Any regrets about the roles you've played or the choices you made when you were younger and, well, in your prime?" That was it. That was the moment everything changed. Helen's eyes, those piercing blue eyes that had captivated audiences for decades, went ice cold. She sat up straighter, and when she spoke, her voice had an edge that could cut glass. "When I was younger and in my prime?" Helen repeated slowly. "Are you suggesting that I'm no longer in my prime, Lorraine?" Lorraine's smile was starting to look more like a grimace. "Well, I mean, your younger days when you were doing all those glamorous roles, the sexy roles. Times have changed, haven't they? The industry's different now. You're doing more, what would you call them, mature roles, character parts?" Helen leaned forward, her eyes never leaving Lorraine's face. "Let me make something absolutely clear. I am still in my prime. I am doing the best work of my career right now. The fact that you seem to equate youth with value, with relevance, with being in one's prime, says far more about you than it does about me." The studio had gone completely silent. Even the camera operators seemed to be holding their breath. Lorraine's face was beginning to flush, that telltale pinkness creeping up her neck. "Helen, I think you're overreacting a bit," Lorraine said, her Scottish accent becoming more pronounced as stress crept into her voice. "I'm just trying to have a conversation here. There's no need to be so sensitive." "Sensitive?" Helen's voice rose slightly. "You've spent the last 10 minutes patronizing me, reducing my entire career and current work to nothing more than a curiosity piece about age. Do you ask male actors these questions? When you had Anthony Hopkins on, did you marvel at how he's still working at 86? Did you call him brave for doing his job?" Lorraine shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her notes forgotten in her lap. "That's different, and you know it. I'm not being ageist, Helen. I'm celebrating you." "Celebrating me?" Helen's laugh was sharp and utterly devoid of humor. "You're infantilizing me. You're treating me like some sort of performing circus animal who's still managing tricks despite being ancient. Look at the old lady go. Isn't it marvelous she can still remember her lines?" The audience was transfixed. Some people had their hands over their mouths. Others were leaning forward in their seats, not wanting to miss a single word of this unexpected explosion. This wasn't morning television anymore. This was something raw and real, and completely unscripted. Lorraine tried to regain control, her professional training kicking in. "Helen, I really think you're misunderstanding my intentions here. I have the utmost respect for you. You're a legend. An icon. I'm just trying to connect with our viewers at home, many of whom are older themselves and might find your story inspiring. So you're using me as inspiration porn?" Helen fired back immediately, the message being, "Look, even old people can do things." "Is that really the conversation you want to have, Lorraine? Because I'm more than happy to have it." Lorraine's face was now fully flushed, and cracks were appearing in her composure. Her voice took on a defensive tone. "You're twisting my words. I don't appreciate being made to look like some kind of villain here when I'm just doing my job, asking questions that our audience wants answered." "Your audience wants to know if I'm too old to work?" Helen challenged. "Your audience wants you to repeatedly question whether someone of my years should still be acting." "I don't believe that for a second. I think these are your questions, Lorraine. Your obsessions. Your prejudices." Lorraine's hands gripped the arms of her chair. "Now, hang on just a minute. You don't get to come on my show and accuse me of prejudice. I've been doing this for over 30 years. I've interviewed thousands of people. Nobody has ever complained about my interviewing style before." "Maybe nobody's called you out before," Helen shot back. "Maybe people have been too polite, too British, too afraid of causing a scene on morning television. Well, I'm done being polite about casual ageism and sexism dressed up as friendly chat." The second section of this absolute disaster began when Lorraine, clearly rattled and feeling cornered, made the catastrophic decision to double down instead of backing down. Her Scottish temper, usually so carefully hidden beneath layers of professionalism and morning show sweetness, started to show. "You know what, Helen?" Lorraine said, her voice taking on a harder edge. "I think maybe you're just having a bad day. Maybe you got out of the wrong side of the bed this morning. We all have those days when we're a bit cranky, especially when we're tired. Long journeys can be exhausting at any age, but particularly—" "Don't you dare finish that sentence," Helen interrupted, her voice low and dangerous. "Don't you dare sit there and patronize me further by suggesting I'm cranky or tired or hormonal or any of the other dismissive things women get accused of when they dare to speak up. Lorraine's eyes flashed. I wasn't going to say hormonal. My God, you're putting words in my mouth now. This is ridiculous. You're being completely unreasonable. I invite you onto my show. I try to have a nice conversation, and you attack me. Nice conversation? Helen's voice dripped with contempt. You call that a nice conversation? Lorraine, let me educate you, since you seem to need it. When you repeatedly bring up someone's age in a way that suggests it's a limitation, that's ageism. When you express surprise that someone is still capable and working, that's patronizing. When you do this specifically to women while giving men a pass, that's sexism. And when you do all of this on national television and then act wounded when you're called out, that's both unprofessional and frankly pathetic. The audience gasped audibly. Several people had pulled out their phones and were clearly recording. The producers in the control room must have been having a collective meltdown, but the cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of this spectacular implosion. Lorraine stood up from her chair, her body language aggressive now, all pretense of morning show warmth completely abandoned. Pathetic? You're calling me pathetic? Let me tell you something, Dame Helen Mirren. You come on here with your high and mighty attitude, acting like you're better than everyone else. I've built a career on being kind, on being welcoming, on making people feel comfortable. And you repay that by turning this into some kind of political statement? Helen stood as well, matching Lorraine's energy. Political statement? This is about basic human decency and respect. This is about treating people as individuals, rather than reducing them to a single characteristic. You want to talk about your career, Lorraine? Let's talk about how you've built that career on the backs of female guests who you've consistently undervalued and diminished. How many times have you asked women about their age, their weight, their appearance, their relationships, while asking men about their achievements? How dare you? Lorraine hissed, her Scottish accent thick now. How bloody dare you stand there and lecture me about interviewing women? I am a woman. I've fought my way up in this industry. I've broken barriers. I've given a platform to countless people. And this is the thanks I get? You want thanks? Helen's voice was incredulous. You want gratitude for doing the bare minimum of your job? For giving people a platform where you then proceed to belittle them? Lorraine, being a woman doesn't exempt you from perpetuating sexist and ageist attitudes. In fact, it makes it worse because you should know better. The studio audience was completely divided now. Some people were nodding in agreement with Helen. Others looked uncomfortable. And a few were clearly Team Lorraine, shaking their heads at Helen's perceived rudeness. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Lorraine pointed a finger at Helen, her professionalism completely shattered. You know what your problem is? You're bitter. You're bitter because the roles have dried up, because you're not the ingenue anymore, because the industry has moved on, and instead of accepting that gracefully, you're taking it out on me. The change in Helen's expression was chilling. If looks could kill, Lorraine would have been a puddle on the floor. When Helen spoke, her voice was quiet but absolutely lethal. The roles haven't dried up, Lorraine. I'm busier now than I've ever been, working with the most exciting directors and on the most challenging projects of my career. But thank you for revealing exactly what you think. Thank you for showing everyone watching that beneath that sunny exterior, you genuinely believe that women have an expiration date, that we're only valuable when we're young and decorative. That's what you really think, isn't it? Lorraine's face contorted. Stop putting words in my mouth. I never said any of that. You didn't have to say it explicitly, Helen countered. It's been dripping from every question you've asked, every assumption you've made. You've spent this entire interview treating me like a relic who should be grateful for still being allowed to work. Well, I'm not grateful. I'm furious. Furious that in 2025, we're still having these conversations. Furious that women like you, who should be allies, who should be lifting other women up, are instead perpetuating the same tired, destructive narratives. Lorraine's hands were shaking now. Whether from anger or something else was hard to tell. You don't get to come on my show and attack me like this. You don't get to make me the villain of your little feminist crusade. I'm not the enemy here. Then stop acting like one. Helen's voice rang out across the studio. Stop with the backhanded compliments. Stop with the age obsession. Stop treating women over 50 like we're brave for simply existing and continuing to work. We're not brave. We're just doing our jobs, and we're bloody good at them. The final section of this catastrophic interview began when a producer tried to intervene. You could see him approaching from off-camera, making urgent gestures, clearly trying to get Lorraine to go to a commercial break or end the segment. But Lorraine waved him away angrily, too invested in the confrontation now to back down. "You want to know the truth?" Lorraine said, her voice rising to a near shout. "The truth is, yes, I do find it remarkable that you're still working at your age, because most people your age are retired, are taking it easy, are enjoying their grandchildren. That's not ageism, that's reality. And if you can't handle a few questions about age, maybe you shouldn't be doing publicity for your films." The studio erupted. Half the audience was booing, the other half was cheering, and Helen stood there in the center of it all, a pillar of controlled fury. When she spoke, her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Most people my age are retired because they've been forced out. Because industries like this one, because people like you, have made it clear that they're no longer welcome, no longer valued, no longer seen. You call it reality. I call it discrimination. And the fact that you're so comfortable with it, that you're actually defending it, tells me everything I need to know about you, Lorraine." Lorraine stepped closer, her finger jabbing toward Helen. "You're twisting everything. You're making me out to be some monster when all I was trying to do was have a bloody conversation. You're the one who came in here with an agenda, looking for a fight." "An agenda?" Helen's laugh was harsh. "My agenda was to talk about my work, my film, my craft. But you couldn't do that, could you? You couldn't resist the low-hanging fruit of age commentary. You couldn't see past my birth certificate to the artist standing in front of you." "Oh, spare me the martyrdom," Lorraine spat. "You're not the first older actress to work, Helen. You're not special. There are plenty of women your age still acting, still doing well. You don't own the monopoly on aging in Hollywood." "I never claimed to," Helen fired back. "But those other women are also facing the same prejudice, the same assumptions, the same casual dismissal dressed up as admiration. The difference is, I'm actually calling it out instead of smiling and accepting it like a good little girl." Lorraine's face was crimson now, her composure completely gone. "Good little girl? I'm 57 years old, Helen. Don't you dare patronize me with that condescending bullshit." The curse word hung in the air, shocking in the context of morning television. The producer was frantically gesturing now, but both women ignored him completely, locked in their battle. "Now you know how it feels," Helen said coldly. "Now you know what it's like to be on the receiving end of patronizing comments and assumptions. Not pleasant, is it? But I've been getting it from you for the last 20 minutes. And before that, from countless interviewers just like you who think they're being nice when they're actually being insulting." Lorraine's chest was heaving. "I am nice. Everyone knows I'm nice. I'm the nice one. You're the one being horrible here. You're the one ruining what should have been a lovely interview." "It could have been lovely," Helen agreed, her voice like ice. "If you'd actually prepared properly. If you'd asked me about my craft, my process, my choices as an artist. If you'd treated me with the same respect you'd give to a male actor of equivalent stature. But you didn't. You focused on my age because that's all you can see when you look at me. Not an actress, not an artist, not a professional. Just an old woman who's still inexplicably working." Lorraine threw her hands up. "Fine. You want to make me the bad guy? Fine. I'm the terrible person who asked about your age. I'm the awful interviewer who was trying to connect with an audience who might actually relate to discussions about getting older. I'm the villain in your narrative. Is that what you want to hear?" "I want to hear an apology," Helen said simply. "I want you to acknowledge that your line of questioning was inappropriate. That's all it would take, Lorraine. A simple acknowledgement and an apology." The studio went dead quiet. Everyone waited for Lorraine's response. This was the moment where she could have salvaged something from the wreckage, could have turned it around, could have shown grace under pressure. But Lorraine, wounded and defensive and too far gone to think clearly, made the worst possible choice. "I'm not apologizing," she said flatly. "I didn't do anything wrong. You're the one who overreacted. You're the one who turned a friendly interview into a confrontation. And quite honestly, if this is how you're going to behave, if this is the attitude you're going to bring, then I don't think this interview can continue." Helen stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, deliberately, she began to remove her microphone. The tiny clip mic attached to her blazer came off first. Then the battery pack from her waistband. She placed them carefully on the chair where she'd been sitting, her movements precise and controlled. "You're absolutely right," Helen said, her voice carrying across the silent studio. "This interview cannot continue. Because you cannot have a conversation with someone who refuses to listen, who refuses to learn, who refuses to acknowledge when they've caused harm. I came here in good faith, Lorraine. I came here to promote my work and share my passion for acting. But what I found was someone more interested in marveling at my age than engaging with me as an artist." Lorraine crossed her arms defensively. "So you're just going to walk out?" "Very professional. More professional than continuing to participate in my own diminishment," Helen replied. "More professional than sitting here smiling while you pepper me with questions you'd never ask a man. More professional than pretending this is acceptable behavior from someone who's supposed to be a respected journalist." "I am a respected journalist." Lorraine's voice cracked slightly. "I've won awards. I've been doing this for decades." "Then act like it," Helen said simply. She turned to the audience, many of whom were still recording on their phones. "I apologize to all of you for this scene. You came here expecting entertainment, and instead you've witnessed something uncomfortable. But perhaps that discomfort is necessary. Perhaps it's time we all got uncomfortable with the casual ageism and sexism that pervades our media, our entertainment, our society." She looked back at Lorraine, who was standing rigidly by her chair, her face a mask of anger and humiliation. "And Lorraine, I genuinely hope you take some time to reflect on this. Not for my sake, but for the sake of every other woman who will sit in this chair after me. They deserve better. We all deserve better." With that, Helen Mirren turned and walked off the set. Not a storm out, not a dramatic flounce, but a dignified exit, her head held high, her shoulders back, every inch the dame she was. The cameras followed her as she walked past the stunned crew, past the frozen producers, towards the exit of the studio. Behind her, Lorraine stood alone on the set, the audience quiet, the atmosphere heavy with shock and something else. Something like collective recognition that they'd witnessed something significant, something that would be talked about for days, weeks, maybe longer. As Helen reached the studio door, she paused for just a moment, her hand on the handle. Without turning around, she said one final thing, her voice carrying clearly back to where Lorraine still stood. "I'm 79 years old, Lorraine, and I've never been more powerful, more confident, or more capable than I am right now. I just wish you could see that. I wish you could see any of us." Then she opened the door and walked through it, leaving behind a studio full of people trying to process what they'd just witnessed, and a host who would have to face the consequences of an interview gone catastrophically, unforgettably wrong.